"Sir, can I take the leftovers for my mother?" said the hungry girl. Richard Thompson was finishing his solitary dinner at the most elegant restaurant in Chicago when he felt a gentle touch on his arm. At 52, the real estate businessman wasn't used to being interrupted during his meals, especially by a child who looked as plain as the girl now standing beside him. The girl couldn't be more than 10 years old. Her blonde hair was unkempt, and her brown clothes showed clear signs of prolonged wear. She held a ceramic bowl with both hands, as if it were her most precious possession. "Sir, sorry to bother you," she said in a tiny voice that was almost lost in the restaurant noise. "Can I take the leftover food for my mother?" Richard looked up from his phone where he was checking his emails and observed the girl with a mixture of surprise and irritation. Around them, other customers were already beginning to whisper and discreetly point toward the table. "How did you get in here?" he asked, looking around to locate some security. "This is no place for children alone." The girl wasn't intimidated by the man's curt tone. Instead, she pointed to the door leading to the kitchen. "I work here, sir. I wash dishes for old Joe from the kitchen. In return, he lets me take the leftovers that were going to the trash." Richard felt a strange discomfort growing in his chest. He had never imagined that a child could be working there, right under his nose, while he savored meals that cost more than many people earned in a week. "And your mother? Where is she?" he asked, trying to maintain a neutral tone. The girl's eyes filled with tears that she tried to hide by blinking quickly. "She can't leave the house, sir. She's been very sick for several weeks. We only have me to work and get food." Richard looked at his still half-full plate. The grilled salmon with mushroom risotto had cost $45, and he had barely touched half of it. Beside it, the dessert he had ordered on impulse remained untouched. "What's your name?" he asked, surprising himself with the kindness that emerged in his voice. "Emily, sir. Emily Davis." "And your mother? What's her name?" "Sarah. Sarah Davis. She sews to earn some money, but now she can't even do that properly." Richard gestured for her to come closer. The murmurs around them increased, but he decided to ignore them for now. "Emily, you can take my food, yes. But tell me one thing. How long have you been working here?" "About 2 months, sir. Since my mother started feeling sick and can't do many sewing jobs anymore. Old Joe is very good to me. He lets me eat something sometimes too." Richard watched how she held the bowl so carefully, as if she knew that food represented much more than a simple meal. It was the difference between her mother having dinner or going to sleep hungry another night. "Do you go to school, Emily?" "Yes, sir, at the local public school. But after school I come straight here. I have to help my mother. She has no one else but me." The businessman felt something tightening in his chest. There was something in that child's dignity that touched him in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Emily wasn't begging or whining. She simply wanted to work to support her family. "You can take everything," he said, pushing the plate toward her. "And take the dessert too. Chocolate lava cake with vanilla ice cream. I'm sure your mother will like it." Emily's eyes lit up with such pure gratitude that Richard felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you so much, sir. Mrs. Sarah will be so happy. She loves sweets, but it's been so long since she's had any." As Emily carefully transferred the food into her bowl, Richard couldn't stop watching her. There was something familiar about her face, but he couldn't pinpoint what. Perhaps it was just the impression of innocence lost too early that troubled him. "Emily, where do you live?" he suddenly asked. "Nearby, sir, on Maple Street, number 127. It's a small house in the back of a lot." Richard nearly choked on the wine he was drinking. Maple Street was just 3 blocks from his main office. How was it possible that a family lived in such need so close to his prosperous world? "In the back of a lot?" "Yes, sir. My mother rents a small house there. The owner is very kind, lets us pay the rent when we have money, but we haven't been able to pay for 2 months now." The girl finished packing the food and prepared to leave, but Richard stopped her with a gesture. "Emily, wait a moment. You said your mother sews?" "Yes, sir, she does. She's very good at it. She used to have plenty of work making clothes for many people in the neighborhood. But after she started feeling unwell, she lost almost all her clients." "What kind of work did she do?" Emily thought for a moment, as if trying to find the right words. "She did everything, sir. She sewed new clothes, fixed old ones, even made school uniforms. My mother has magic hands, my grandma used to say. Any fabric she touched turned into something beautiful. Richard felt a growing curiosity about that family. There was something in the story that didn't quite fit, but he couldn't identify what. "And your father, Emily? Where is he?" The girl's face closed off instantly, and Richard realized he had touched a sensitive spot. "My father left when I was little. My mother said he wasn't ready to be a father, and that it was for the best." The simplicity with which she said that broke Richard's heart. Emily had learned very early that life doesn't always offer happy endings, but even so, she maintained impressive dignity for her age. "Well, Emily, you can take this food to your mother, but would you mind if I paid your bill here at the restaurant?" Emily shook her head immediately. "No, sir. My mother always taught me that it's better to work than to get things for free. She says when we work we keep our dignity." Richard was impressed by the response. It was rare to find people with such integrity, especially someone so young going through such great difficulties. "All right then. But if you or your mother need anything at all, you come find me, okay? My name is Richard Thompson. I work over on Main Street, number 450. Emily smiled, lighting up her whole face. "Thank you, Mr. Richard. Mrs. Sarah always says there are still good people in the world. Now I know she's right." Richard watched her head toward the kitchen with her bowl full of food, greeting some staff along the way. It was clear she was already known there, and that people liked her. When Emily disappeared through the kitchen door, Richard found himself alone with his thoughts. The encounter with that girl had stirred something inside him that had been dormant for a long time. Perhaps it was compassion. Perhaps it was guilt over his comfortable life while others struggled to survive. He called the waiter and paid the bill, but he couldn't get Emily out of his head. There was something about that story that deeply intrigued him. The mention of sewing, the neighborhood where she lived, all of it awakened a strange feeling of familiarity. Richard decided to walk to his car instead of calling his driver. He needed fresh air to organize his thoughts. As he walked through the streets of Chicago, he found himself imagining what life would be like for Emily and her mother in that little house at the back of a property. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next day, Richard couldn't focus on his work. His thoughts kept returning to Emily and her situation. During the morning meeting with his partners, he caught himself looking out the window toward Maple Street, imagining what that family's life must be like. "Richard, are you okay?" asked his partner, Michael Anderson. "You seem distracted today." "I'm fine, Michael, just thinking about some new projects." But Richard wasn't fine. For the first time in a long while, he felt troubled by the contrast between his prosperous life and the reality of people like Emily and Sarah. That girl had planted a seed of restlessness in his heart that grew with each passing hour. In the afternoon, he decided to take a drive through the neighborhood where Emily lived. He didn't have a specific excuse, just a curiosity he couldn't control. Driving slowly down Maple Street, he looked for number 127. When he finally found the address, Richard parked his car across the street and observed the property. It was a relatively large lot with a main house in front, and, as Emily had described, a smaller building in the back. The back house was simple, but well kept, with small window boxes and clothes hanging on the line. Richard was about to leave when he saw Emily coming home from school. She carried a backpack that seemed too heavy for her small shoulders and walked with hurried steps. The businessman watched as she entered the little back house. A few minutes later, Emily came out again, now in different clothes, and headed toward the street. Richard assumed she was going to her job at the restaurant. Seeing her leave for work right after returning from school made his chest tighten again. On impulse, Richard got out of the car and walked to the little back house. He didn't know exactly what he intended to do, but he felt he needed to get to know this family that had stirred his emotions so deeply. He knocked softly on the door and waited. He heard slow footsteps from inside, as if the person had trouble moving. "Who is it?" came a woman's voice from inside the house. "My name is Richard Thompson. I met your daughter Emily yesterday at the restaurant. I'd like to speak with you if possible." The door opened slowly, revealing a woman Richard estimated to be about 40 years old, though she looked older due to the marks of fatigue on her face. Her brown hair was tied in a simple ponytail, and she wore a homemade dress that, though simple, was impeccably clean and well-ironed. "Are you Sarah?" "Yes, that's me. Emily told me about you yesterday. She said you were very kind to her." Richard studied Sarah's face and felt that strange sense of familiarity again. There was something about her features that bothered him, like a memory buried deep in his mind. "May I come in? I'd like to talk with you about Emily and perhaps about how I can help." Sarah hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Mr. Richard, I really appreciate your concern for Emily, but you don't need to trouble yourself with us. We'll find a way to manage our situation." "Please, Mrs. Sarah, I just want to talk. I don't mean to offend or bother." Sarah eventually agreed and opened the door for him to enter. The house was small but organized with great care. The furniture was sparse and old, but everything was clean and tidy. In the living room, Richard saw some fabrics and an old sewing machine. "Are you working, Ma'am?" he asked, pointing to the fabrics. "I'm trying to finish some adjustments for a neighbor. It's not much, but every bit helps." Richard noticed how Sarah moved slowly and how her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the fabrics. It was clear she was ill, just as Emily had described. "Would you mind if I ask what's going on with your health?" Sarah sighed and sat in the chair near the sewing table. "The doctors say it's stress, poor diet, overwork. My body is paying for years of struggle to support Emily alone, but it's nothing that won't get better with time and care." "And why don't you seek proper treatment?" "Mr. Richard, you seem like a good person, so I'll be frank. I don't have money for private doctors, and the community health clinic here in the neighborhood is always packed. By the time I get an appointment, weeks have passed. Emily is my priority now. As long as I can work a little, we'll manage." Richard felt a deep admiration for that woman's strength. Even sick and in financial hardship, she maintained her dignity and put her daughter's well-being above all else. "Mrs. Sarah, may I ask a personal question? Did you work for any company before starting to sew on your own?" Sarah's face instantly changed. A shadow crossed her eyes, as if Richard had touched an old wound. "Why do you ask?" "Just curiosity. You seem familiar to me, but I can't remember where we know each other from." Sarah was silent for a long moment, studying Richard's face with growing attention. "Mr. Richard, what is your full name?" "Richard Thompson Wilson." "Why?" Sarah's face visibly paled, and she leaned on the table to keep her balance. "My God," she murmured. "Richard Thompson Wilson from American Construction?" Now it was Richard's turn to be surprised. "Yes, exactly. How do you know?" Sarah took a deep breath, as if preparing for something very difficult. "Mr. Richard, I worked at your company 15 years ago. I was Sarah Johnson back then. I worked in the accounting department." Richard felt the world spin around him. Fragments of memories began to form in his mind, and he finally understood why Sarah's face was so familiar to him. "Sarah Johnson," he repeated slowly. "Sarah Johnson, who was fired by Supervisor Robert Williams." "Exactly," she said, with a bitterness she couldn't completely hide. "I was fired when I was 6 months pregnant with Emily, accused of an error in the accounting books that I didn't make." Richard sat heavily in the chair Sarah offered him. The memories came back with full force now. He remembered the case perfectly. Sarah was an exemplary employee, always punctual, always accurate in her work. When Robert Williams accused her of altering some numbers in the financial reports, Richard knew something was wrong. "I remember," he said, his voice hoarse. "I knew the accusations against you were false." "And why didn't you do anything?" Sarah's question held no accusation, only a deep sadness that cut through Richard like a blade. "Because I was a coward," he admitted. "I was just a middle manager at the time. Robert Williams was my direct superior, and I was afraid to confront him. I was afraid of losing my job, my position. I hated myself for it for years." Sarah nodded slowly, as if that answer confirmed something she already knew. "After I was fired, I never managed to get a steady job again. No one wanted to hire a pregnant woman with a blemish on her professional record. That's when I started sewing to survive. Richard felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. The chain of events that had led Emily to work washing dishes in a restaurant had begun with his own cowardice 15 years earlier. Sarah, I don't know what to say. I've carried this guilt with me all these years. When I saw her being unfairly fired, I should have had the courage to speak up. I should have defended you. Mr. Richard, what happened happened. There's no use dwelling on the past. I've learned to live with the consequences of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the consequences were terrible for you and for Emily. You lived in hardship because of my cowardice. Sarah stood up and went to the window, looking at the clothesline where the clothes dried in the sun. You know, Mr. Richard, for a long time I was angry. Angry at Robert Williams, angry at the company, angry at life. But after Emily was born, I understood that anger was only hurting me more. I decided to focus on raising my daughter the best way possible, even with all the difficulties. Richard watched Sarah as she spoke, admiring the strength and dignity she maintained even in the face of so much adversity. Sarah, let me help now. Let me make up, at least in part, for the mistake I made in the past. How? I can offer you a job at my company, a position in the accounting department with a fair salary and all benefits. Sarah turned to face him, and Richard saw tears forming in her eyes. Why would you do that? Out of pity? Out of guilt? For justice, he replied firmly. You were unfairly harmed, and I had a hand in it by not defending you, but also because I see that you're a person of character, an extraordinary mother, and someone who deserves a chance to rebuild her life. Sarah remained silent for several minutes, clearly wrestling with conflicting emotions. And Emily? How would she be? Emily could dedicate herself to her studies like any child her age should. She wouldn't need to work any more to help support the household. Mr. Richard, your proposal is very generous, but I need to think. It's not an easy decision after so many years of living independently. Richard understood Sarah's hesitation perfectly. After years of struggling alone, accepting help must be a difficult decision for a proud woman like her. Sarah, may I make a suggestion? Why don't you come to my company tomorrow? You can see the environment, talk with some people, see how things work today. You don't need to commit to anything, just explore the possibilities. Sarah thought for a moment and then agreed. All right, I can come take a look, but I can't promise anything. That's all I ask. Now, about your medical treatment. The company has a very good health plan. You could have access to specialized doctors, tests, proper treatment for your condition. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. It's been so long since I've had any real hope of getting better. I had resigned myself to this constant pain, this fatigue that never goes away. Richard stood up and approached the window where Sarah was standing. You don't need to carry this burden alone anymore. I know I can't undo the past, but I can try to build a better future for you and for Emily. At that moment, they heard the door opening and Emily came in, clearly surprised to see Richard there. Mr. Richard, what are you doing here? Sarah and Richard exchanged quick glances. I came to talk with your mother about some job opportunities, Emily. We discovered we've known each other for a long time. Emily looked from one to the other, sensing something important was happening. Mum, is everything okay? Mr. Richard isn't bothering you, is he? Sarah smiled and hugged her daughter. Everything's fine, my dear. Mr. Richard brought some very good news for us. What kind of news? Richard knelt down to Emily's eye level. Emily, how would you feel if your mother could have a steady job again? A job where she earned enough money for you both to live more comfortably? Emily's eyes lit up. That would be wonderful. My mother is very smart, Mr. Richard. She knows how to do lots of things. Any employer would be happy to have her working for them. Richard smiled at the girl's innocent loyalty. I believe that, Emily. What if I told you that maybe you wouldn't need to work at the restaurant anymore, that you could focus just on your studies and being a child? Emily fell silent for a moment, as if the idea were too hard to believe. Is that really possible? Could I have time to play and study like the other kids at my school? Very possible, Richard assured her. But first, let's see how your mother adjusts to the new job. Tomorrow she'll visit the company where I work. Emily hugged Sarah tightly. Mom, this is like a miracle. Sarah looked at Richard over her daughter's head, her eyes still full of doubt, but also with cautious hope. We'll see, my dear. We'll see how things unfold. Richard prepared to leave, but turned to Sarah one last time. Sarah, there's something I need to say. I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know I've carried the weight of my omission all these years. Seeing you two struggle with such dignity made me realize how much I need to make amends. What I'm offering isn't charity, it's justice. Sarah nodded, touched by Richard's sincerity. Thank you for coming here today. Regardless of what happens tomorrow, it was important to hear that. Richard left the house with mixed feelings. On one hand, he was happy to have found a way to help Sarah and Emily. On the other, he felt the weight of guilt for having taken so long to do the right thing. As he drove back home, he thought about how to explain the situation to his own family. His daughter Jennifer, who now managed part of the company's business, would certainly have questions about his decision to hire Sarah. Richard decided he would be honest about the past and his motivation to correct an old mistake. That night, Richard barely slept. His mind was full of plans for welcoming Sarah to the company and concerns about how she would adapt after so many years away from the formal workforce. But beneath all these practical worries, there was something deeper, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. The next day, Richard arrived early at the office and spent the morning preparing everything for Sarah's visit. He spoke with the human resources manager, Patricia Miller, a 58-year-old woman who had become his confidant over the years. Richard, are you sure this is a good idea? Asked Patricia Miller after hearing the whole story. Hiring someone out of past guilt could create complications. It's not out of guilt, Patricia, it's about justice, and also because I believe Sarah could be an excellent employee. She worked with us for years without ever having a problem. And how do you plan to explain this to Jennifer and the other partners? Richard sighed. His daughter Jennifer had inherited his practical business sense from him, but sometimes it came with a coldness that worried him. I'll be honest about everything. If they don't agree, I'll take full responsibility for the decision. Patricia Miller shook her head but smiled. You've always been stubborn once you set your mind to something. I'll prepare all the necessary documentation in case she accepts the position. Around noon, Richard received a call from the reception informing him that Sarah had arrived. He went down personally to meet her on the ground floor, immediately noticing the effort she had made to dress appropriately. She wore a simple yet elegant outfit and had styled her hair more elaborately. Even so, it was evident that she was nervous. Sarah, thank you for coming. How are you feeling? Nervous, she admitted. It's been a long time since I've been in a corporate environment. Richard led her through the company's hallways, introducing her to some employees and briefly explaining how the organization worked. Sarah observed everything attentively, asking relevant questions about the processes and systems. When they reached the accounting department, Richard introduced Sarah to Daniel Roberts, the current supervisor of the section. Daniel was a young man, about 30 years old, who had taken the position 2 years earlier. Daniel, this is Sarah Johnson. She worked in our accounting department many years ago and is interested in returning to the field. Daniel greeted Sarah politely and began explaining the changes that had occurred in the department since she had worked there. Computerized systems had replaced many manual processes, but the foundation of the accounting work remained the same. What systems is Sarah experienced with? Daniel asked. Back when I worked here, we used simpler systems, Sarah replied honestly. But I've always been good at learning new things, and I imagine with some training I could adapt to modern systems. Richard watched the conversation with satisfaction. Sarah was proving to be professional and realistic about her abilities, while Daniel seemed impressed with her solid basic knowledge. After an hour visiting different departments, Richard took Sarah to his private office. He offered her coffee and sat across from her. What did you think of the company today? It's changed a lot since I worked here, said Sarah. It's bigger, more modern. But the people seem kind and the work isn't very different from what I did before. And what do you think about the possibility of coming back to work here? Sarah fell silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Mr. Richard, I need to be frank with you. Part of me is excited about this opportunity. It would be wonderful to have financial stability again, to be able to take better care of Emily, to have access to proper medical treatment. And the other part? The other part is afraid. Afraid I won't be able to keep up after so many years away. Afraid that people will find out about my past and judge me. And afraid that, deep down, you're doing this just out of pity or guilt. Richard leaned forward, looking Sarah directly in the eyes. Sarah, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Yes, I do feel guilt. Guilt for not having defended you when I should have. But that's not the only reason for this offer. During our conversation yesterday and today, I could see that you are a person of exceptional character, a woman who raised a wonderful daughter alone, who maintained her dignity even in the worst circumstances, who never let hardships make her bitter. Those are qualities that any company should value. And the other employees? How will they react when they find out I was fired from here in the past? The people who matter will understand that everyone deserves a second chance. And if anyone has a problem with that, the problem is theirs, not yours. Sarah sighed deeply. And Emily, how would she feel if I went back to working full-time? Emily would attend school full-time and have all the opportunities a 10-year-old child deserves to have. Tutoring if needed, extracurricular activities if she wants, and most importantly, time to be a child. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You know, Mr. Richard, all these years I've dreamed of a moment like this, a moment when I could offer Emily a better life. But at the same time, I've always been afraid it was just an impossible dream. It doesn't have to be impossible, Sarah. The decision is in your hands. Sarah remained silent for several minutes, clearly wrestling with an internal battle. Richard respected her time, understanding that this wasn't an easy decision. If I accept, she said finally, what exactly would my position be? Salary, benefits, responsibilities. Richard had prepared for this question. Senior Accounting Analyst, salary of $4,000 monthly, plus full benefits, health insurance, dental plan, meal vouchers, transportation allowance, 2 weeks of paid vacation per year, in addition to national holidays. Your responsibilities would include analysis of financial statements, bank reconciliation, and preparation of monthly reports. Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. The salary offered was more than she had earned in years of sewing, and the benefits represented a security she had lost so long ago. And the probation period? 3 months, as is standard, but with full training in the first 30 days so you can adapt to the new systems. When would you need an answer? Sarah, there's no rush. I understand it's an important decision. How about we talk again at the end of the week? That would give you time to think carefully and perhaps discuss it with Emily. Sarah agreed, and Richard walked her to the exit. In the elevator, she turned to him. Mr. Richard, regardless of my decision, I want you to know that today was one of the most hopeful days I've had in a long time. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Sarah. I'm the one who should thank you. You gave me a chance to do the right thing after all these years. When Sarah left the building, Richard went up to his office with a mix of anxiety and hope. He knew he had made the right offer, but he also understood Sarah's reservations. Accepting that job would mean a radical change in her life and Emily's. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Richard spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on other tasks, but his thoughts constantly returned to Sarah and Emily. He wondered what the conversation between mother and daughter would be like that night when Sarah told her about the job opportunity. Meanwhile, in the small house on Maple Street, Sarah arrived home still processing everything that had happened. Emily was waiting anxiously for her, having returned from school and decided not to go to work at the restaurant so she could talk with her mother. Mom, how did it go? Tell me everything. Sarah sat beside her daughter on the small sofa and began recounting her visit to the company. She described the modern building, the kind employees, the advanced computers, and most importantly, Richard's offer. Mom, that's wonderful, exclaimed Emily when Sarah finished telling her. Why do you seem worried? Because it's a big change, my dear. If I accept this job, our life will change completely. Change how? Well, first you won't need to work at the restaurant anymore. You'll be able to focus only on your studies. Emily thought for a moment. But I like old Joe and the other restaurant staff. They are kind to me. You can still visit them sometimes, but you won't work there anymore, Emily. Children your age should study and play, not work to help support the household. And what about you? Will you be very tired working all day? Sarah smiled at her daughter's concern. I might be more tired than I am now, but it will be a different kind of tiredness, Emily. It will be the tiredness of someone building a better future for both of us. Emily hugged her mother. Then I think you should accept. We deserve a better life, Mum. You've worked so hard for it. Are you sure? Some things will change. We might have to move to a better house. You might be able to switch to a private school. A private school? Emily's eyes widened. But what about my friends from my current school? You can still keep in touch with them, and you'll make new friends too. Emily became thoughtful. Mum, Mr. Richard seems like a good person. When he helped me at the restaurant, it wasn't because he felt sorry for me. It was because he genuinely cared. How do you know that? Because he looked into my eyes when he spoke to me, and because he wasn't embarrassed when other people in the restaurant started looking at us. Bad people get embarrassed about doing good things in front of others. Sarah was impressed by her daughter's wisdom. You're growing up so fast, Emily. Sometimes you speak like someone much older. It's because I learned from you, Mom. You always taught me to pay attention to people, to see if they're sincere or not. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Her mind was full of possibilities and worries. On one hand, Richard's offer represented everything she had dreamed of: financial stability, medical care, a better life for Emily. On the other hand, accepting help from someone she had considered partly responsible for her hardships was emotionally complex. She got up and went to the window, looking at the stars in the Chicago sky. There was something poetic about the fact that her salvation had come through Emily herself, the daughter born amid the difficulties caused by her unfair dismissal. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a determination she hadn't felt in a long time. She had made her decision during the night, and now she knew exactly what she needed to do. After taking Emily to school, she walked to a public phone booth and called Richard's company. "Hello, I'd like to speak with Mr. Richard Thompson, please." "Sarah?" Richard answered personally, surprised to receive the call so early. "Good morning, Mr. Richard. I'd like to schedule a conversation with you today, if possible. I have my answer about the job proposal." "Of course, Sarah. How about we meet at the company around 2 in the afternoon? "Perfect. See you then." Richard hung up the phone with a racing heart. Sarah's tone had sounded determined, but he couldn't guess what her answer would be. At 2 o'clock sharp, Sarah arrived at the company. This time she seemed more confident, walking with firm steps toward Richard's office. "Sarah, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." "Mr. Richard, I thought a lot about your proposal. I talked with Emily, weighed all the pros and cons, and reached a decision." Richard prepared himself for any answer. "I accept the job," Sarah said firmly, "but with a few conditions." Richard felt immense relief. "What conditions?" "First, I want it to be clear to everyone in the company that I was hired on merit, not as a personal favor. If there are any questions about my work capability, I want to be given the opportunity to prove my worth." "I completely agree." "Second, I want to start with the standard 3-month probation period. If at the end of that period you're not satisfied with my work, I'll accept dismissal without any hard feelings." "Sarah, I'm sure that won't be necessary, but I agree to your terms." "And third," Sarah took a deep breath, "I want you to know that I'm accepting this job not just because I need it, but because I believe I can make a positive contribution to the company. I want my work to speak for itself." Richard stood up and extended his hand to Sarah. "Sarah Johnson, welcome back to American Construction. I look forward to us working together." Sarah shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Richard. I promise you won't regret this decision. When would you like to start?" "As soon as possible. Maybe next Monday?" "Perfect. Patricia Miller, our HR manager, will contact you tomorrow to finalize all the hiring and training details. When Sarah left the company that day, she felt transformed. For the first time in 15 years, she had a steady job, with proper paperwork and benefits. More importantly, she had real hope for a better future for Emily. She decided to stop by Emily's school before going home. She wanted to give her daughter the news in person. She found Emily in the schoolyard playing with some classmates. When the girl saw her, she ran toward her. "Mom, what are you doing here? Did something happen?" "Yes, my dear. Something did happen, but something very good. I accepted the job at Mr. Richards' company." Emily screamed with joy and hugged Sarah so tightly she almost knocked them over. "Mom, that's wonderful. When do you start?" "Next Monday. And do you know what this means?" "That our lives are going to get better." "Exactly. And it also means you won't be working at the restaurant anymore. From now on, you focus only on your studies." Emily became thoughtful for a moment. "Mom, can I go to the restaurant today to say goodbye to old Joe and the other staff? I want to thank them for everything they've done for me." Sarah felt proud of her daughter's manners. "Of course you can, my dear. It's very important to thank the people who have helped us." That afternoon, Emily went to the restaurant for her last day of work. When she told old Joe from the kitchen about her mum's new job, the elderly man was genuinely happy. "That's great, girl. Your mum deserves good things. You deserve to just be a kid too, not a worker." "Old Joe, thank you so much for everything. You've been very good to me. You were a good employee, Emily. If you need anything, you know where to find me." Emily left the restaurant with tears in her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, not sadness. She knew she was closing a difficult chapter in her life and opening another full of possibilities. Over the weekend, Sarah and Emily spent their time organizing the house and planning the changes to come. Sarah set aside her best clothes for her first days of work, and Emily organized her school supplies, excited about the prospect of having more time to study. On Sunday evening, mother and daughter sat down at the table for dinner, a simple meal, but made with the best ingredients they could afford with the money they had. "Mum, can I ask you something?" said Emily. "Of course, my dear." "Do you think Mr. Richard is an angel?" Sarah smiled at Emily's innocent question. "Why do you ask that?" "Because he appeared in our lives right when we needed him most, and he knew you from a long time ago. It seems like fate." "I don't know if I believe in angels, Emily, but I do believe there are good people in the world, people who try to do the right thing when they have the chance. Mr. Richard seems to be one of those people. And do you think he really cares about us? Or is he doing this just because he feels guilty about the past?" Sarah was impressed by Emily's insight. "I think it's a bit of both, my dear. But the initial reason doesn't matter. What matters is that he's giving us a real opportunity to change our lives. What we do with that opportunity is up to us." On Monday morning, Sarah got up before dawn. She wanted to make sure she looked impeccable for her first day of work in 15 years. She chose her best outfit, fixed her hair carefully, and looked at herself in the mirror with a mix of nervousness and determination. Emily also woke up early, wanting to wish her mother good luck. "Mom, you look beautiful. You're going to be the best employee the company has ever had." "Thank you, my dear. Now get ready for school. I'll drop you off on my way to work." Sarah arrived at the company 15 minutes early. Patricia Miller, the HR manager, welcomed her warmly and guided her through all the onboarding processes. Documents, ID badge, computer passwords, introduction to company policies, everything was done in an organized and welcoming way. "Sarah, you'll be working directly with Daniel Roberts in the accounting department. He's an excellent supervisor and will help you adapt to the systems we use now." When Sarah arrived at the accounting department, Daniel greeted her with a genuine smile. "Good morning, Sarah. Ready to get started?" "Ready and eager," she replied. Daniel spent the first 2 hours explaining the computerized systems the company used. Sarah paid attention to every detail, asking relevant questions and demonstrating her ability to learn quickly. "You're adapting very well," Daniel commented after showing her the bank reconciliation system. I can see you have solid experience in the field. Thank you. I'm a little nervous but determined to do a good job. During the coffee break, Sarah was introduced to other employees in her department. Some people showed natural curiosity about the new colleague, but everyone was polite and welcoming. Richard passed by the accounting department late in the morning, apparently for a routine consultation with Daniel, but Sarah knew he wanted to check how she was adapting. Good morning, Sarah. How is your first day going? Very positive, Mr. Richard. Daniel has been an excellent supervisor, and the systems are more advanced than I imagined, but nothing I can't learn. Excellent. If you need anything, don't hesitate to talk to Patricia or me. Richard left the department satisfied. Sarah was showing exactly the professionalism and dedication he expected from her. At the end of the first day, Sarah felt mentally tired but deeply satisfied. It had been challenging to adapt to the new systems and routines, but she knew she was on the right track. When she got home, Emily was eagerly waiting to hear about the first day. Mum, tell me everything. How was it? Sarah sat next to her daughter and recounted every detail of the day. She talked about Daniel, about the new colleagues, about the computer systems, about the company environment. And you know what the best part was, Emily? What? The feeling of being useful again, of knowing that my work has value, that I'm contributing to something important. Emily hugged her mother. I always knew you were important, Mum. Now other people will discover that too. In the following weeks, Sarah quickly settled into her new routine. She arrived at work punctually every morning, showed initiative in learning new processes, and gradually took on greater responsibilities within the department. Daniel was impressed with her work ethic and attention to detail. In just 3 weeks, Sarah was already handling complex bank reconciliations and preparing monthly reports with an accuracy that surprised even the most experienced employees. Richard, I need to speak with you about Sarah, said Daniel during a supervisor's meeting. Richard felt a pang of concern. Is there a problem? Quite the opposite. She's exceptional. In 3 weeks, she's mastered systems that normally take new employees 2 months to learn. And beyond technical competence, she has an exemplary work attitude. Richard smiled, feeling validated in his decision. She's always been an exceptional employee. I'm glad she's adapting well. Richard, may I make a suggestion? I think we should consider giving her greater responsibilities, perhaps supervising some processes or training new employees. Let's see how she feels about that after she completes the probation period. Meanwhile, Emily's life was also changing drastically. For the first time in a long while, she could dedicate herself completely to her studies. Her grades improved significantly, and she began participating in extracurricular activities at school. One afternoon, when Sarah arrived from work, Emily greeted her with exciting news. Mom, guess what? Mrs. Amanda said I have a talent for math and drawing. She thinks I could sign up for an art workshop that's starting at school. Sarah beamed. That's wonderful, Emily. Of course you can sign up. I always knew you were a very smart child. And you know what else? The teacher said if I keep doing well in my studies, I might get a scholarship to a private school next year. Sarah felt tears of joy forming in her eyes. Seeing Emily flourish academically was one of the greatest gifts she could receive. My daughter, I'm so proud of you. You're taking advantage of every opportunity that comes your way. It's like you always taught me, Mom. When a door opens, we have to walk through and do our best. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 1 month after Sarah started working, Richard received an unexpected phone call at his home. It was a Saturday morning, and he was enjoying a rare moment of rest when the phone rang. Richard, this is Patricia Miller. Sorry to bother you on the weekend, but a situation has come up at the company that I think you should know about. Richard felt a twinge of concern. What happened? During the week, we discovered some irregularities in the accounting books. Nothing too serious, but some discrepancies that need investigating. Daniel asked Sarah to review some old reports, and she found some interesting things. What kind of things? She discovered a pattern of small adjustments to the numbers going back several years. Individually, they're small amounts, but together they represent a considerable sum. Daniel thinks someone might have been embezzling money from the company for a long time. Richard sat down heavily in his armchair. Do you have any suspicion who might be doing this? Not yet, but Sarah is analyzing the records systematically. She has a very sharp eye for detail, Richard. If there's anything wrong in the books, she'll find it. And Sarah, how is she handling this situation? Very professionally. She came to work on Saturday voluntarily to continue the investigation. She said she wants to make sure there's nothing wrong before presenting her conclusions. Richard decided to go to the company to speak with Sarah in person. He found her in the accounting department, surrounded by stacks of reports and with several files open on her computer. Sarah, I heard you discovered some irregularities. Sarah looked up from the papers, her eyes showing a mix of concentration and concern. Richard, I found some discrepancies that worry me. Small adjustments in the numbers that individually could be calculation errors, but that follow a very specific pattern. Can you show me? Sarah organized some documents on the desk and began explaining her findings. She pointed to a series of monthly reports showing consistent adjustments in certain accounts, always in amounts small enough to go unnoticed in a superficial analysis. Look here, Mr. Richard, these adjustments always happen at the same time each month, always in the same accounts and always for amounts that stay below the threshold that would normally catch the auditor's attention. Richard studied the documents with growing attention. How long has this been going on? From the records I could access, at least 5 years, but I suspect it might be longer. And do you have any idea who could be doing this? Sarah hesitated before answering. Mr. Richard, I don't want to make accusations without solid evidence, but the adjustments were always made by someone with administrative access to the accounting systems. This limits the number of people who could be involved. Richard felt a chill in his stomach. He knew the number of people with that level of access was very limited, and several of them were trusted employees who had worked at the company for many years. Sarah, have you spoken with Daniel about this? Yes, I have. He's as worried as I am. We're going to present our complete analysis to you on Monday, but we wanted to be sure of all the details first. Richard watched Sarah working with total dedication to protect the company that, ironically, had unfairly fired her years before. There was something deeply touching about her professional loyalty. Sarah, may I ask why you're dedicating yourself so much to this investigation, especially considering your history with the company? Sarah stopped working and looked directly at Richard. Richard, this company gave me a second chance when I needed it most. Regardless of what happened in the past, I work here now, and my job is to protect the company's interests. Besides, she smiled slightly, I've always hated injustice. If someone is stealing, it affects all the honest employees. Richard felt deep admiration for Sarah's integrity. Do you need any additional help to complete your investigation? Actually, it would be helpful to have access to some older records that are archived, and maybe Daniel can help me with some reports he has access to that I don't. You'll have everything you need. And Sarah, thank you for your dedication. I know you're working beyond normal hours for this. It's my job, Mr. Richard, and besides, I want this company to continue being a good place to work, for me and for all the other employees. Richard left the company that Saturday with mixed feelings. On one hand, he was worried about Sarah's discoveries and their possible implications. On the other, he was deeply impressed by the integrity and dedication she demonstrated. On Monday morning, Sarah and Daniel presented their complete analysis to Richard and Patricia Miller. The data was undeniable. Someone had been systematically diverting small amounts from the company for at least 5 years, totaling a considerable sum. Based on the pattern of the adjustments, explained Sarah, the person responsible must be someone with access to the administrative systems and detailed knowledge of the company's audit processes. That gives us a list of, at most, 6 or 7 people, said Daniel gravely. Richard studied the list of names. They were all people he trusted, some working at the company for over a decade. How do you think we should proceed? I think we should conduct a surprise audit, suggested Patricia. Examine the computers and personal files of everyone who has administrative access. And we should bring in an external auditor to ensure impartiality, added Sarah. Richard agreed with the suggestions, and authorized them to proceed with the formal investigation. What none of them expected was that the discovery would lead to even more surprising revelations. The external audit began on Wednesday and immediately confirmed Sarah's suspicions. But when the auditor started tracing the specific transactions, he made a shocking discovery. "Richard," said the auditor on Friday afternoon, "I found the source of the discrepancies, but there's something else you need to know." Richard, Sarah, Daniel, and Patricia gathered in the main office to hear the auditor's report. "The discrepancies are being made by Robert Williams, but they didn't start 5 years ago. They started 15 years ago, right after he was promoted to supervisor of the accounting department." Richard felt the blood freeze in his veins. Robert Williams was the same man who had unfairly fired Sarah. "And there's more," continued the auditor. "It seems Mrs. Sarah's dismissal wasn't just unfair, it was deliberately planned to cover up evidence of Robert's initial discrepancies." Sarah remained silent for several minutes, processing the information. "Are you saying my dismissal was part of a scheme to hide theft?" "Exactly. Robert altered some numbers in the books and then accused you of making those changes. When you were dismissed, he could correct the numbers back, hiding his own irregularities." Richard felt a wave of nausea. Not only had he been cowardly in not defending Sarah, but she had been the victim of a conspiracy much more sinister than he had imagined. "Where is Robert now?" asked Richard. "He resigned last week," said Patricia, "claimed personal reasons and said he wanted to move to another state." "Do you think he found out about our investigation?" "It's possible," said the auditor. "But regardless, we have enough evidence for criminal and civil proceedings." Sarah finally broke her silence. "Mr. Richard, I would like to make a request." "Of course, Sarah, anything." "I would like a complete copy of this investigation to be sent to my personal file, not for legal use, but for my own knowledge. For 15 years, I've carried the pain of being accused of something I didn't do. Knowing the full truth will help me finally close that wound." Richard felt tears forming in his eyes. "Sarah, you will have everything. And more than that, the company owes you much more than just a job. You were a victim not only of an unfair dismissal, but of a criminal conspiracy." "Mr. Richard, I don't want compensation money. What I want is justice and the opportunity to continue working here with my reputation completely cleared." Richard looked at that extraordinary woman who, even after discovering she had been the victim of a much greater injustice than she imagined, maintained her dignity and integrity. "Sarah, you will have justice. And more than that, you will be publicly recognized as the person who exposed this fraud and saved the company from additional years of losses." In the following weeks, the story spread throughout the company. Sarah was seen not only as a competent employee, but as a heroine who had uncovered a long-running fraud. Robert Williams was located and prosecuted, eventually confessing his guilt and being ordered to repay the embezzled funds. For Sarah, the complete vindication of her reputation was more valuable than any financial compensation. Finally, after 15 years, she could say she had been proven innocent, not just of the original accusations, but had shown she was the victim of a conspiracy. Richard made a decision that even surprised Sarah. During a company-wide meeting, he publicly told the whole story. He explained how Sarah had been unfairly dismissed, how she had returned to the company, and how her integrity and competence had exposed Robert's fraud. "Sarah Johnson represents the very best of our company," Richard told all the gathered employees. "Integrity, competence, loyalty, and the courage to do the right thing even when it's hard." The audience applauded for a long time, and Sarah felt that finally, after so many years, her professional reputation was not only restored but strengthened. When she got home that day, Emily was eagerly waiting to hear about the meeting. "Mom, how did it go? Does everyone at the company know the truth now?" "Yes, they do, my daughter. And do you know what the best part was?" "What?" "The best part was realizing that during all those difficult years, I never lost my integrity, and that you grew up seeing that, learning that it's always worth doing the right thing even when it's hard." Emily hugged Sarah. "Mum, I always knew you were an honest person. Now everyone knows too." Sarah's vindication had effects she didn't expect. Daniel, impressed with her investigative skills and integrity, recommended her for a promotion. Richard approved immediately, and Sarah was promoted to assistant supervisor of the accounting department with a significant salary increase. "Sarah," Richard said when he offered her the promotion, "this company committed a terrible injustice against you in the past. I can't change that, but I can ensure your future here is as bright as your talent deserves. Mr. Richard, I accept the promotion not as compensation for the past, but as recognition of my present work. That's how I prefer to see things." With the promotion and salary increase, Sarah and Emily's life changed drastically. They were able to move to a larger and better house in a safer neighborhood. Emily enrolled in a private school with an excellent academic reputation, where her talent in math and drawing could flourish even more. But perhaps the most significant change was emotional. Sarah finally freed herself from the burden of injustice she had carried for 15 years. She could work without the shadow of doubt over her reputation, and Emily could grow up seeing that truth and justice, even if they take time, eventually prevail. Richard was also transformed by the experience. Seeing how his past cowardice had contributed to a terrible injustice made him rethink many aspects of his life and leadership. He became more attentive to power dynamics in his company and more willing to stand up for employees who might be treated unfairly. 6 months after Sarah returned to work at the company, Richard received news that took him completely by surprise. His daughter Jennifer, who managed part of the family business, asked to speak with him about something important. "Dad, I want to talk about Sarah Johnson," Jennifer said during a lunch at the office. Richard prepared for a difficult conversation. Jennifer had always been skeptical about decisions based on emotions, and he imagined she would question the hiring of Sarah. "What do you want to know about her?" "Actually, I don't want to know anything. I want to tell you that I think your decision to hire her was one of the best you've ever made." Richard was genuinely surprised. "Really? Why?" "Dad, over the past few months, I've observed how Sarah works. She is not only technically competent, but brings a work ethic and integrity that inspire others. The morale of the accounting department has improved drastically since she arrived." "And you no longer think it was a decision based on sentimentalism?" Jennifer shook her head. "Initially I thought so, yes, but I realized you made the right decision for the right reasons, and even if it was initially motivated by guilt or feelings, the outcome was excellent for the company." Richard felt a deep satisfaction upon hearing that. Jennifer's approval meant a lot to him, especially because she was known for her objective business analysis. "And you know what else, Dad? Sarah gave me an idea for a social project that I think we should consider." "What kind of project?" "She suggested that the company could offer scholarships to employees' children who demonstrate academic excellence. Her daughter, Emily, is a perfect example of the kind of child who would benefit from such a program." Richard was intrigued by the idea. "Tell me more about it." Sarah explained to me how difficult it is for lower-income families to provide quality education for talented children. Even when children have potential, they often don't have access to the opportunities that would allow them to develop it fully. And did she suggest this as a benefit for herself? Quite the opposite. She emphasized that Emily specifically should not be considered for the program to avoid conflicts of interest. She was thinking of other employees in the company. Richard was once again impressed with Sarah's integrity. "And what do you think of the idea?" "I think it's brilliant. It would be a relatively small investment that could have a huge impact on the lives of some families, and it would create a strong sense of loyalty among employees. Let's develop it then. Talk to Sarah and Patricia Miller about how to structure such a program." When Richard told Sarah about the conversation with Jennifer, she was touched by his daughter's approval, but also insisted that Emily not be considered for any scholarship program the company created. "Mr. Richard, it would be inappropriate for Emily to benefit from a program I helped conceive. Besides, with my new salary, I can pay for her education without any problems." "Sarah, your concern for ethics is admirable, but wouldn't it be unfair to deny Emily an opportunity based solely on your position in the company?" "Even so, I prefer that she not be considered. There are many other children who need these opportunities." The conversation highlighted once again Sarah's exceptional character, who consistently put the interests of others above her own. The scholarship program was launched 3 months later, initially benefiting 5 employees' children. The project was so successful that other companies in the sector began implementing similar programs, creating a larger movement of corporate social responsibility. Emily, even though she was not a beneficiary of the scholarship program, continued to excel academically at her new school. Her talents in math and drawing developed impressively, and she began receiving recognition for her art projects. One afternoon, when Sarah arrived from work, Emily was waiting for her with exciting news. "Mom, my art teacher said one of my drawings will be displayed in a school exhibition for parents and special guests." "Emily, that's wonderful. Which drawing?" "It's a portrait I made of our family," said Emily, showing the drawing to Sarah. Sarah was moved when she saw the artwork. Emily had drawn the two of them, but not in a simple house or difficult circumstances. Instead, they were portrayed in a beautiful home, with Sarah wearing elegant clothes and both smiling with genuine happiness. "Emily, it's beautiful. But why did you draw me in these elegant clothes?" "Because that's how I see you now, Mom. As a successful, respected, happy woman. I don't want anyone to see our family as poor little things who need pity anymore. I want them to see us as strong women who have overcome." Sarah hugged Emily with tears in her eyes. Her daughter had grown so much, not just physically but in maturity and life perspective. "My daughter, you're becoming an amazing woman. I'm so proud of who you're becoming." "It's because I learned from the best example, Mom. You taught me that no matter what happens, we can always keep our dignity and work to improve our situation." The school art exhibition took place 2 weeks later. Sarah invited Richard to accompany her, since he had become an important figure in the family's life. When Richard saw Emily's drawing at the exhibition, he was deeply touched. "Sarah, Emily has real talent for art. This drawing isn't just technically good, but emotionally powerful." "She always liked drawing, but never had the opportunity to properly develop this talent," said Sarah. "And now, is she taking art classes at school?" "Yes, she is, and also some extra courses on weekends. She's loving having time to explore her passions." Richard watched Emily explaining her work to other exhibition visitors. The girl he had met asking for food leftovers at a restaurant had transformed into a confident and articulate young woman, proud of her family and her achievements. "Sarah, you two have transformed so much in such little time." "Actually, Mr. Richard, I don't think we've changed that much. We just had the opportunity to show who we always were inside." Richard reflected on that observation. It was true. The dignity and character of Sarah and Emily had always been there, even when they faced the greatest difficulties. The opportunity had just allowed those qualities to flourish. During the exhibition, Richard observed how other people interacted with Emily and Sarah. It was evident that they were respected, not out of pity or sympathy, but for what they had achieved on their own merit. "Emily," said Richard when he approached the girl, "I'm very proud to see how you're developing. Your drawing is truly impressive." "Thank you, Mr. Richard. You know, sometimes I still can't believe how our life has changed. It feels like a dream." "And how do you feel with all these changes?" Emily thought carefully before answering. "I'm happy, of course, but I also feel a great responsibility. My mum worked very hard to give us these opportunities, and I don't want to waste them." Richard was impressed by the maturity of the response. "What kind of responsibility do you feel?" "Responsibility to study hard, to be a good person, to help other people when I can, and also responsibility to make my mum proud of me." "Emily, I'm sure your mum is already very proud of you, and I'm also proud to know you both." When the exhibition ended and they were walking to the car, Sarah turned to Richard. "Mr. Richard, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Why did you decide to help us that day at the restaurant? I mean, what was the real reason that made you act?" Richard stopped walking and thought carefully about his answer. "Honestly, at the time I'm not sure I knew the reason myself. There was something about Emily that touched me deeply. Maybe it was her dignity, or the way she worked without playing the victim. But I think deep down, it was because she reminded me of something I had forgotten about compassion and social responsibility. And now, looking back, How do you see this whole experience? Now I see that you two gave me much more than I gave you. You reminded me of values I had lost in the midst of financial success. You showed me what integrity and perseverance really mean. Sarah smiled. So we were a good influence on each other. Definitely, agreed Richard. 2 years after Sarah had returned to the company, Richard made a decision that surprised even her. During the annual review meeting, he announced that Sarah had been promoted to manager of the accounting department, replacing Daniel, who had been promoted to a regional position. Sarah, said Richard during the promotion ceremony, this promotion is not a favor or compensation for the past. It is recognition for your exceptional work, your natural leadership, and your contribution to making this company a better place to work. Sarah accepted the promotion with the grace and humility that had become her trademark. Mr. Richard, I accept this responsibility with seriousness and gratitude. I promise to continue working to maintain the integrity and excellence this company deserves. Sarah's promotion was celebrated throughout the company. She had become a respected figure, not only for her technical competence, but for her ability to lead with empathy and integrity. With the new position, Sarah gained not only more responsibilities, but also a salary that allowed the family to dream of possibilities that once seemed impossible. Emily was able to enroll in a more advanced art course, and Sarah began to consider pursuing a graduate degree in administration. One evening, while having dinner in their new home, now much more spacious and comfortable, Emily made an observation that deeply touched Sarah. Mom, remember when we lived in the little house and I worked at the restaurant? Of course I remember, my daughter. Why? Sometimes I miss that time. Not the poverty or the hardships, but the feeling that it was just the two of us against the world. There was a simplicity to it that I kind of miss. Sarah understood perfectly what Emily was saying. I get it, Emily. There was a purity in those difficult times. We knew exactly what was important. Each other. Exactly. And now, with all this happiness and prosperity, sometimes I worry if we'll forget the lessons we learned when things were hard. Sarah felt proud of Emily's insight. My daughter, it's very important that you have this awareness. Success and prosperity are wonderful, but they must not make us forget our values or our compassion for others who are still struggling. How do we make sure we don't forget? We keep helping other people when we can. We remain grateful for what we have. And we keep remembering where we came from. Emily nodded, understanding. Is that why you still visit Mrs. Dorothy in the little house where we used to live? Exactly. Mrs. Dorothy helped us when we needed it, and now that we can, we help her too. The conversation highlighted how Sarah had managed to pass on to Emily not just the importance of success, but also the importance of gratitude and social responsibility. On the 3rd anniversary of her return to the company, Richard organized a special celebration for Sarah. During a meeting with all employees, he once again told the full story of how she had uncovered Robert Williams' fraud and how she had become an exemplary leader in the company. Sarah Johnson represents the best of the human spirit, Richard told the audience. She turned an injustice into an opportunity for growth, not just for herself but for all of us. After the ceremony, Sarah and Richard spoke privately in his office. Richard, said Sarah, calling him by his first name for the first time, I want to thank you for everything, but mostly for giving me the chance to prove my worth. Sarah, you don't need to thank me. You earned everything on your own merit. Even so, the initial opportunity came from you, and that made all the difference in my life and in Emily's life. Richard reflected on the journey they had shared. You know, Sarah, when I met Emily at that restaurant, I never imagined that moment would change my life as much as it changed yours. How so? You two taught me about courage, integrity, perseverance. You reminded me that true success isn't just financial, but is measured by the positive impact we have on other people's lives. Sarah smiled. And our story isn't over yet. Emily is preparing to take the college entrance exam for architecture. She wants to design beautiful and functional homes for families who don't have much money. That's wonderful. Has she always had that drive to help others? Always. I think growing up with hardships, but seeing that there are good people willing to help, made her want to give back to the world. Richard felt a deep satisfaction knowing that Emily was channeling her life experiences to help others. And you, Sarah? What are your plans for the future? Well, I'm thinking about pursuing a graduate degree in management. I want to prepare to take on even bigger responsibilities here at the company, and who knows, in the future, help implement more social programs. Sarah, you would be an excellent candidate for an MBA. The company could even sponsor your studies. Thank you for the offer, but I prefer to pay for my own education. I've learned to value the things I work for more. Once again, Richard was impressed by Sarah's integrity. 6 months later, Emily took the architecture entrance exam and was accepted into one of the best universities in the state. Her math test score was one of the highest among all applicants, and her portfolio of drawings impressed the admissions board. "Mom, I did it!" Emily shouted when she got the result. "I was accepted into the architecture program." Sarah hugged her daughter with tears of joy. "My daughter, I'm so proud of you. You worked so hard to deserve this." "And you know what the best part of the interview was?" Emily asked. "What?" "When the professors asked me why I wanted to be an architect, I told them our story. I told them about how we lived in small houses and how that made me realize the importance of well-designed spaces for families' well-being." "And what did they say?" "They were impressed. They said that applicants with real-life experience and social motivation are exactly the kind of students they want to graduate." Sarah smiled, realizing how the difficult experiences of the past had become advantages in the present. "Emily, you're proving that it doesn't matter where we come from, but where we're going." When Richard heard about Emily's acceptance into the university, he insisted on celebrating with the family. He organized a special dinner at the same elegant restaurant where he had met Emily years before. "Richard, are you sure it's appropriate for us to celebrate here?" asked Sarah. "This place brings back so many memories." "That's exactly why we should celebrate here," said Richard. "Let's turn a place of difficult memories into a place of celebration." During dinner, Richard asked for permission to make a special toast. "Emily, Sarah, I want to toast not just to your achievements, but to the journey you've taken to get here. You both taught me that true nobility doesn't come from birth or wealth, but from character and perseverance." Emily, now an 18-year-old young woman, confident and articulate, responded to the toast. "Mr. Richard, thank you for seeing potential in us when others saw only poverty. But most of all, thank you for giving us opportunities to prove our worth." Sarah watched her daughter speaking with such eloquence and felt that all the suffering of the past had been worth it to reach that moment. After dinner, they made a symbolic visit to the restaurant kitchen. Old Joe, now older but still working, was moved to see Emily graduated and heading to university. "Young lady, you've grown so much, and look how beautiful and smart you are," said the old cook. "Old Joe, I'll never forget your kindness to me when I was a child. You treated me with dignity when I needed it most. And you were always a special girl, Emily. I knew you would go far in life." The visit to the kitchen closed an important emotional circle for the family. They had returned to the place where it all began, but now as people transformed by growth and opportunities. During Emily's first year of college, Sarah began her graduate studies in business administration. Studying after so many years away from books was challenging, but she was determined to grow professionally. Richard offered support whenever necessary, but Sarah maintained her characteristic independence, preferring to achieve her goals on her own merit. "Richard," said Sarah during one of their regular conversations, "sometimes I still can't believe how our life has changed." "And how do you feel about all these changes?" "Grateful mostly, but also responsible. I feel I have an obligation to use our experiences to help other people who are going through similar difficulties." "What kind of help are you thinking of offering?" "I'm considering starting a mentorship program for women trying to re-enter the workforce after difficult periods. I know how frightening it is to try rebuilding a career after years of struggling to survive." Richard was excited about the idea. "Sarah, that would be wonderful. The company could support such a program. Actually, I was thinking of doing it independently from the company, as a personal project of mine." "Why not within the company?" "Because I want it to be something of my own, you know. something I do out of personal conviction, not as part of my job. Richard understood perfectly. Sarah had always preferred to achieve things on her own merit and wanted her social projects to have the same authenticity. Sarah's mentorship program started small, with her helping 3 women in her community. She offered guidance on resumes, job interviews, and most importantly, emotional support for women who had lost confidence in their professional abilities. Emily, even busy with her college studies, also got involved in the project. She used her artistic skills to create presentation materials and helped with research on job opportunities. "Mum, it's amazing to see how these women transform with your guidance," said Emily after a mentorship session. "It's rewarding to see other people discovering their own strengths," replied Sarah. "It reminds me of our own journey. And it makes me realize how lucky we were to find Mr. Richard at that crucial moment." Sarah reflected on that. "You know, Emily, the more I think about our story, the more I realize it wasn't luck. It was a combination of our determination to maintain dignity even in hardships, and Richard developing the courage to do the right thing." "How so?" "If we had given up or played the victim, even if Richard wanted to help, it wouldn't have worked. And if Richard hadn't grown as a person to recognize his past mistakes, he would never have offered us a real opportunity." Emily understood the wisdom of her mother's observation. "So our story is about the growth of everyone involved." "Exactly. Richard grew in courage and social responsibility. I grew in forgiveness and willingness to accept help. And you grew up seeing that dignity and perseverance are rewarded." The conversation highlighted how the transformation of their lives had been the result not only of external circumstances, but of personal growth of everyone involved. On the 5th anniversary of Sarah's return to the company, Richard made a decision that even surprised his daughter Jennifer. He offered Sarah a partnership stake in the company. "Sarah," said Richard in a private meeting, "during these 5 years you have not only proven to be an exceptional manager, but also a visionary leader. I want to formalize this by offering you a share in the business." Sarah was genuinely shocked by the proposal. "Richard, this is unexpected. What exactly would the arrangement be?" "A 15% stake in the company, with voting rights in strategic decisions. It would be an official recognition of your contribution not only to operational efficiency, but to the company's culture and values." Sarah remained silent for several minutes, clearly processing the magnitude of the offer. "Richard, I need to be honest. Part of me is excited about this opportunity. It would be the fulfillment of dreams I didn't even dare to have." "And the other part?" "The other part wonders if I'm ready for this level of responsibility. Being a partner in a company is very different from being an employee, even a manager. Sarah, you have demonstrated excellence in everything you've taken on, and more importantly, you've shown the integrity and vision needed to be a true business leader." Sarah thought about Jennifer and how she would react to the proposal. "And Jennifer? How does she feel about this?" "Actually, it was her idea. She said you brought a perspective and an ethic that elevated the entire company." Sarah smiled, touched by Jennifer's trust. "May I have a few days to think about it?" "Of course. It's an important decision that shouldn't be made hastily." Sarah spent the next few days discussing the proposal with Emily, now a mature college student whose advice she valued. "Mum, what's your biggest concern about accepting the proposal?" asked Emily. "I think I'm afraid that success will change who I am. I'm afraid of losing humility and connection with people who are still struggling like we did." "Mum, can I be frank?" "Always, my daughter. I think that fear shows exactly why you should accept it. If you had lost your humility, you wouldn't be worried about that." Emily was right. Sarah's concern about keeping her values was evidence that she hadn't lost them. "And besides," Emily continued, "think of how much good you can do as a partner in the company. You can implement more social programs, improve working conditions for all employees, serve as an example for other companies." Sarah realized that Emily had grown to become not only her daughter, but a wise advisor. "Do you think I should accept?" "I think you've worked your entire life to deserve an opportunity like this, and I believe you can do incredible things with this position. The following week, Sarah gave her answer to Richard. "Richard, I accept your partnership proposal, but I want to set some conditions." "What are they?" "First, I want to use part of my new position to implement more comprehensive social programs, scholarships, mentorship programs, support for employees in need." "I completely agree." "Second, I want our company to be recognized not just for profits, but for social responsibility. I want us to be an example of how business success can coexist with compassion and justice." "Sarah, that vision is exactly why you deserve to be a partner in this company." "And third," Sarah smiled, "I want our story to be told, not as propaganda but as an example that second chances and social justice aren't just nice concepts, but viable business practices." Richard extended his hand to seal the agreement. "Partner Sarah Johnson, welcome to the ownership of American Construction." The partnership formalization ceremony was held 2 months later, with all company employees, family members, and several local business community figures in attendance. Emily, now in her 3rd year of architecture school, was radiant with pride for her mother. During her speech at the ceremony, Sarah moved the audience with her words. "This partnership represents much more than my personal growth. It represents proof that when we offer real opportunities to determined people, everyone benefits. I promise to use this position not only to grow our company, but to create more opportunities for other people who, like me, just need a chance to show their worth." Richard also gave a speech that deeply touched everyone present. "Sarah Johnson taught me that true leadership doesn't come from power or position, but from character and compassion. She transformed our company not just into a more efficient business, but into a better place to work and a better example for our community." After the ceremony, there was a reception where Emily had the opportunity to speak with several business owners and community leaders. Her confidence and articulation impressed everyone who spoke with her. "Emily," said a local businesswoman, "your mother must be very proud of you." "Actually, we're proud of each other," Emily replied. "My mother taught me that true success is measured not by what we achieve for ourselves, but by how much we help others achieve their own dreams." Emily's response demonstrated how she had internalized the lessons of values and social responsibility that Sarah had taught her. In the months following her formalization as partner, Sarah implemented several initiatives that transformed not only the company, but its reputation in the community. The scholarship program was expanded to include not only employees' children, but also talented youth from underprivileged communities. The professional mentorship program she had started as a personal project was incorporated into the company's official activities, offering free guidance for women seeking career re-entry. "Sarah," Richard said during a review meeting, "the numbers don't lie. Since these programs began, our reputation in the community has improved dramatically. Employee morale is at the highest level we've ever measured, and paradoxically, our profitability has also increased. It's because we've discovered that doing good and doing business aren't conflicting goals," Sarah replied. "When we treat our employees well and invest in the community, we create a positive cycle that benefits everyone." Jennifer, who had initially been skeptical about the social programs, became one of their strongest advocates. "Dad, Sarah was right from the start. These programs aren't expenses, they're investments. Investments in loyalty, reputation, and social responsibility that translate into positive financial results." The company's transformation caught the attention of the local media, and Sarah was invited to give interviews about business leadership with social responsibility. In all her public appearances, she made sure to credit her perspective to the lessons learned during the years of hardship. "What poverty taught me," she said in one interview, "is that all people have dignity and potential. When we offer real opportunities, not condescending charity, we discover incredible talents that were just waiting for a chance." Emily, now in her final year of architecture, started working as an intern at the company during the summers, contributing to low-income housing development projects. "Mom," Emily said after her first project, "I understand now why you always emphasized that our story wasn't just about us. It's about creating a model that other people can follow." "Exactly, my daughter. Our responsibility is to use our success to open doors for others." Emily's observation highlighted how she had developed not only professional competence, but also a deep sense of social responsibility. On the 10th anniversary of the meeting at the restaurant, Richard organized a special celebration. He invited not only Sarah and Emily, but also old Joe from the kitchen, Patricia Miller, Daniel, Jennifer, and several people whose lives had been touched by the family's story. "Tonight," Richard said during dinner, "we celebrate not just a decade of transformation, but the proof that when we choose compassion over indifference, justice over convenience, we all grow." Sarah, now a 55-year-old woman, elegant and confident, but who maintained the humility that had always characterized her, gave a speech that moved everyone present. 10 years ago, my daughter asked for food leftovers at this restaurant because we didn't have money for a decent meal. Today, she's graduating in architecture, and I'm a partner in a thriving company. But the biggest transformation wasn't financial. It was discovering that the world has far more good people than I imagined, and that we all have the power to make a difference in someone's life. Emily, now a 22-year-old young woman, beautiful and articulate, also spoke during the celebration. "This story taught me that no matter how difficult our circumstances, we can always choose to maintain our dignity and keep working toward our dreams. And it taught me that when we achieve success, our responsibility is to create opportunities for others to make the same journey." Old Joe, now over 70 years old but still working in the kitchen he loved, was invited to speak about his perspective on the story. "I've seen many children pass through this kitchen over the years," he said with emotion in his voice. "But Emily was always special, not because she was needier, but because she never lost hope or kindness in her heart. And Mrs. Sarah, even in the most difficult moments, always treated everyone with respect. They deserved all the good that happened." The celebration concluded with Richard making an announcement that surprised everyone present. "Sarah, Emily, during these 10 years, you've transformed not only your own lives but the lives of everyone around you. That's why I want to announce the creation of the Sarah and Emily Johnson Foundation, dedicated to offering second chances to women and families in difficulty." Sarah was genuinely shocked. "Richard, this is extraordinary. But why use our names?" "Because you two represent everything this foundation should value: dignity in adversity, perseverance in the face of challenges, and generosity in success." Emily approached Richard with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Richard, thank you for seeing potential in us when we were just a desperate family, and thank you for continuing to believe our story can inspire others." The creation of the foundation marked a new chapter in the family's life. Sarah assumed the presidency of the organization, combining her work at the company with leading the foundation's social programs. Emily, recently graduated in architecture, became the foundation's housing project director, developing innovative designs for low-income housing that combined functionality, beauty, and sustainability. 2 years after the foundation's creation, it had already helped over 300 families find financial and professional stability. The model developed by Sarah and her team was being replicated in other cities. "Sarah," Richard said during a foundation evaluation meeting, "you've created something much bigger than we imagined. It's not just a charity organization, but a sustainable model for social transformation." "That's because we learned temporary charity doesn't solve permanent problems," Sarah replied. "But when we offer real opportunities and consistent support, people transform from beneficiaries into contributors to society." Emily, now an architect recognized for her innovative social housing projects, developed a design philosophy reflecting lessons learned during her childhood. "Every project I do," she explained to a group of architecture students, "starts with a simple question: how can this space give dignity to the people who will live in it? Because I learned very early that physical environment deeply affects how we see ourselves and how others see us." Emily's projects received several social architecture awards, but she always made sure to credit her inspiration to her childhood experiences. "My greatest motivation," she said in an interview, "is ensuring no child needs to feel ashamed of where they live. Every family deserves a home that gives them pride and hope." On Sarah's 50th birthday, Richard organized a party that gathered hundreds of people whose lives had been transformed directly or indirectly by the family's story. Company employees, foundation beneficiaries, students who received scholarships, women who participated in mentorship programs. "Sarah," Richard said during his speech at the party, "you've proven that one person with integrity and determination can create waves of transformation that spread far beyond what we can imagine." Sarah, surrounded by Emily, now a successful architect and social activist, and dozens of people she considered part of her extended family, reflected on the extraordinary journey they had taken. "When I look at all of you," she said during her thank you speech, "I see proof that our story was never really about us. It was about discovering that every person has the power to transform lives, including their own." Emily, now 27 and recently married to a fellow architect who shared her passion for social justice, announced during the party that she was expecting her first child. "This baby," she said, hand on her belly, "will grow up hearing the story of how their grandmother turned difficulties into opportunities and how their great-grandfather Richard chose courage over cowardice. I hope these lessons inspire a new generation to keep building a fairer world." Sarah embraced her daughter, moved by the prospect of becoming a grandmother and by the continuity of the values that had guided their lives. "Emily, our grandson or granddaughter will grow up knowing that it doesn't matter where we come from, but what values we carry and how we use them to help others." Richard, now 68 years old and considering retirement, watched the celebration with deep satisfaction. The courageous decision he had made 15 years earlier in the restaurant had transformed into a legacy of social change that would continue for generations. "Sarah," he said at the end of the evening, "thank you for teaching me that true wealth isn't measured by money in the bank, but by the number of lives we positively touch." "Richard," she replied, "thank you for proving that it's never too late to do the right thing, and that when we do, the results exceed our most optimistic expectations." When the party ended and the guests had left, Sarah and Emily were alone in the living room, organizing gifts and reflecting on the evening. "Mom, sometimes when I look at our life now, it seems unreal, like a fairy tale." "It's not a fairy tale, my daughter. It's proof that when we maintain our dignity and keep working toward our dreams, even in the toughest times, extraordinary things can happen. And when people like Mr. Richard choose to help instead of ignore." Exactly. Our story is about the combination of our determination with the compassion of good people who chose to make a difference. Emily hugged Sarah. "Mum, I promise I'll pass these lessons on to my children, and that our story of transformation will keep inspiring other families. That's the greatest legacy I can leave, Emily. Not just the success we've achieved, but the values we've preserved and the opportunities we've created for others." 20 years after that fateful meeting in the restaurant, Sarah was sitting in her office at the foundation that bore her and Emily's name, reviewing reports on the thousands of lives that had been transformed by the programs they had developed. Emily, now a mother of two and an internationally recognized architect for her sustainable social housing projects, still worked actively at the foundation, though she also had her own architecture firm. Richard, retired but still active as a consultant to the foundation, visited regularly to monitor the progress of the programs. "Sarah," he said during one of these visits, "have you ever stopped to calculate how many people have been directly helped by the Foundation's programs? The latest numbers show over 5,000 families directly assisted, and if we consider the multiplier effect, people who were helped and then helped others, we're talking about tens of thousands of lives touched. And it all started with a brave girl asking for leftovers." Sarah smiled, reflecting on the extraordinary journey. "No, Richard. It all started with you choosing to see humanity where others saw only inconvenience. It all started with you deciding to do the right thing even after 15 years. At that moment, Emily entered the office with her two children, Ethan, 5 years old, and Hope, 3 years old. The children ran to hug their grandmother and Grandpa Richard, as they had learned to call him. "Grandma Sarah," said Ethan, "Mommy said today is the anniversary of our family's story. Can you tell it again?" Sarah bent down to her grandson's level. "Ethan, our story is about how a small question can change entire lives. Your mommy, when she was 10 years old, asked a simple question, 'Sir, may I take the rest for my mother?' That simple question opened doors to transformations no one could have imagined. And what's the lesson of the story, Grandma? The lesson is that we should never be afraid to ask for help when we need it, never be ashamed of our situation, and always be ready to help others when we can. Hope, though still young, was also listening attentively. "And can I help people too, Grandma?" "Of course you can, my dear. Even though you're small, you can help by being kind, sharing, and treating everyone with respect." Richard watched the scene with deep emotion. Seeing Sarah passing on the values of compassion and dignity to a new generation completed a circle that had started with his own decision to act courageously many years earlier. "Sarah," he said when the children went out to play, "our story proves that the good we do keeps multiplying through the generations. And it proves that it's never too late to make the right choice, Richard. Your decision to help me not only changed our lives, but created a legacy that will keep impacting lives long after we're gone." Emily, watching the conversation, approached. "And our responsibility now is to ensure that legacy continues, that Ethan and Hope grow up knowing they have an obligation to use their privileges to create opportunities for others." "They're growing up with that knowledge," said Sarah. "Yesterday, Ethan told me that when he grows up, he wants to be an architect like his mother, to build beautiful houses for families who don't have much money. And Hope said she wants to have a store where people without money can get food for free," added Emily. Richard smiled, seeing how the values of compassion and social justice were being naturally passed on to the new generations. When the visit ended and Richard was preparing to leave, he turned to Sarah one last time. "Sarah, can I confess something I've never said before?" "Of course, Richard." "That day at the restaurant, when Emily asked me for the food, my first reaction was irritation. I wanted to call security and have her removed. If I had followed that first impulse, none of these transformations would have happened." Sarah stayed silent for a moment, processing the confession. "Richard, what matters isn't what your first reaction was, but what choice you made. We all have selfish impulses sometimes. What defines us is when we choose to overcome them. Thank you for seeing the best in me, even when I didn't see it in myself. And thank you for giving my daughter and me the opportunity to show the best of ourselves." That night, Sarah stayed alone in her office, reflecting on the 20 years that had passed since that transformative encounter. She thought about all the lives that had been touched, all the opportunities created, all the dreams fulfilled. But more importantly, she thought about how a simple question, "Sir, can I take the rest for my mother?" had become the catalyst for changes that would keep reverberating through the generations. End of story. And now we want to know what you thought of this inspiring story of Sarah and Emily. Do you believe that small acts of compassion can truly transform lives? Leave your comment sharing if you've ever experienced or witnessed similar situations. Your experience may inspire other people. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories that show the power of dignity and perseverance. Thank you for joining us on this touching journey.